Salam, peace be upon you. I am Muhammad Laik Siddiqui, the father of Holophase. Part 9, The Universal Ledger, The Great Energy Illusion. We are going to pull back the curtain on the most sacred, most assumed concept in all of science. We are going to perform an ontological audit on the cosmic currency. We are going to reveal the Great Energy Illusion. Before we begin this descent, let us take a breath and remember the path we have walked together. A brief, vital recap, the foundation upon which this revelation stands. In episode 1, we began with a whisper. What if everything stems from one thing? We introduced phi, not a particle, not a wave, but the primitive potential for connection itself, the possibility of comparison. In episode 2, we established the firewall, the discipline that separates knowledge from fantasy. We learned we cannot measure phi itself, only its differences. All real knowledge is comparative. We introduced the licensed window, the rigorous scope within which any claim must be made and tested. In episode 3, we met the first mathematical object of change, dphi, the differential, the hum of difference. This, we said, is what we actually measure. Information is a difference that makes a difference. In episode 4, we saw how these differences can align, wrap, and cohere to create stable information structures, the first hint of pattern emerging from noise. In episode 5, the triunity. A revelation. From dphi, 3 inseparable readings crystallize. O, the rhythm, the temporal cadence of change. Ke, the shape, the spatial variation. Ni, the movement, the transport that interlock them. Time, space, and motion are not containers. They are 3 shadows of one change. In episode 6, the infinite zoom. Reality has infinite descriptive depth, an endless tower of derivatives, J infinity phi phi. But we, finite beings, only see finite slices, J n phi, limited by the coherence of our licensed windows. Our mantra, infinite depth, finite access. In episode 7, the birth of the integer. We walked around the tree and returned. The closed-loop integral of dphi equals 2 pi n. A whole number emerges from smoothness. This integer is a winding number, a knot. These topological knots are stable, countable. They are particles. Whole numbers come from going around. In episode 8, the nature of objects. We tied the knot in the rope. An object is not a brick of substance added to space. It is a persistent interruption in the smooth field of comparability. A knot. Its identity is topological, protected. An object is a knot, not a brick. We have built a universe from the ground up, using only comparison, change, and topological protection. We have matter. We have number. We have objects. Now, we arrive at the heartbeat of physics, the concept that seems to power everything, to be the currency of the cosmos. Energy. And I tell you now, with the full gravity of our journey behind us, I will say the sentence you asked me to say, clearly and honestly. Part 9 may be the greatest wobbling of our trust in what we believe to be true. Because everything you think you know about energy is an illusion. Not a false illusion, but a profoundly useful one. A necessary fiction that points to a deeper, more astonishing truth. The bank statement that isn't money. The perfect analogy. Let us begin with the most perfect analogy. One that will change how you see everything. Open your bank statement, in your mind. You see columns, deposits, withdrawals, transfers, fees, a final balance. Question: is your bank statement money? No. The statement is not currency. It is not cash flowing in pipes beneath the city. It is a ledger, a record of transactions, a system of accounting. Money in, money out. The total balances. If it doesn't, there is an error, a fee you missed, a transaction not yet posted. The ledger is about money, but it is not made of money. It is made of numbers, rules, and the principle of conservation. What comes in must equal what goes out, plus what remains. Now, feel this truth in your bones. Transplant it to the cosmos. Energy is not a substance. Energy is accounting. Energy is the universal ledger. When a ball falls, it loses height, a change in spatial configuration, a kappa change, and gains speed, a change in temporal rhythm, an ohm change. The books balance. The gravitational potential energy decreases, the kinetic energy increases. We are not transferring a fluid called energy from one bucket to another. We are observing that a certain tally, calculated from ohm and kappa, remains constant. When particles collide, the sum of their motion before equals the sum of their motion after. The books balance. We are not watching little packets of energy stuff bounce around. We are verifying that a specific numerical quantity derived from the phase dynamics of the system is conserved. Energy is the tally. Conservation laws are the bookkeeping rules. This is the core of Part 9, and it changes everything. Why we mistook a ledger for a substance, the comforting illusion. How did civilization make this mistake? Because the ledger behaves like a substance in everyday life, and our minds are pattern makers who crave substance stories. When you eat, you feel more energy. When you run, you feel energy leaving. When you charge a battery, it seems like energy is stored. When a light shines, it seems like energy flows. So we naturally imagine a thing, a cosmic fluid, a fuel. But a ledger also feels like a thing, psychologically. When you see a higher bank balance, you feel rich. When the balance drops, you feel poor. And it is tempting to imagine money substance sitting in a vault, because the number is so powerful. Yet the number is powerful precisely because it is a summary, not because it is a fluid. Energy works the same way. It is a number that stays balanced when you track the right features of change. We reify the number. We substantialize the summary. We committed the fallacy of the bank statement. We mistook the ledger for the cash. This reification is the great energy illusion. It is an illusion that works. It is pragmatically brilliant. It lets engineers build power grids and physicists solve equations. But at the ontological level, the level of what is, it is a category error. Energy does not exist in the way a knot exists. A knot is a topological object, a persistent interruption. Energy is a numerical attribute of a pattern of activity. It is a property, not an entity. Think of the temperature of a room. Temperature is a number that summarizes the average kinetic energy of molecules. You do not say temperature flows from the heater to the couch. You say heat flows, which is a process that changes the temperature readings in different locations. Temperature is the tally. Heat is the process that redistributes the tally. Energy is like temperature for the cosmos. It is the supreme tally of phase activity. The primal tally, from phase activity to a conserved number. Let us now get rigorously specific, using the language we have built. We have our field of comparable potential, phi. We have its change, d phi. We have its shadows, oma and kalpa. These are not abstract symbols, they are measurable rates. Omma is how fast the phase changes at a point, a frequency. Kappa is how the phase slopes across space, a wave vector, a gradient. Now, imagine you have a licensed window, a region of spacetime with a coherence threshold. Within that window, you can measure omega and kappa. You can then construct a certain tally from these measurements. A specific combination of omega squared and kappa squared integrated over the window, weighted by the coherence. In the simplest classical wave, this tally is proportional to the total activity of the field, its vigor of change in time, and its stiffness of variation in space. This tally is what we call energy. It is not an independent substance flowing into the region. It is a number calculated from the phase and gradient readings within the region. When energy is transferred, what is actually happening? The patterns of omega and kappa are rearranging. The values of these measurable rates are changing from point to point. But the specific sum total of a particular combination of these values over the whole licensed system remains constant. The conservation of energy is not a mysterious metaphysical law. It is a mathematical identity that falls out of the structure of the phi field, provided the licensed window respects certain symmetries, in particular, translation symmetry in time. If the laws of change don't depend on when you start your clock, this particular tally must be conserved. It is a bookkeeping rule forced by the grammar of the universe. The prediction. All energy is phase tally. From this, we derive the powerful, falsifiable prediction of Part 9. Prediction. Every specific form of energy, kinetic, potential, chemical, nuclear, dark, must ultimately be reducible to a tally of omega and kappa activity or their higher-order derivative equivalents within a licensed window. There is no energy substance to be found, only these measurable phase dynamics and the conserved number we calculate from them. This is a staggering claim. It means the energy of a moving mass is a tally of the omega and kappa patterns in the gravitational metric field and the matter fields. The energy stored in a chemical bond is a tally of the complex multiscale phase windings and gradients in the electron clouds. The energy of a photon is the omega frequency of the electromagnetic phase oscillation. Even the enigmatic dark energy driving cosmic acceleration must be accountable as a particular tally of vacuum phase activity, a baseline omega kappa product inherent to empty space itself. In holophase, there is no exotic dark energy substance. There is a universal, constant phase activity tally per unit volume of the vacuum, a fundamental parameter of the cosmic ledger. The falsification, the substance that isn't there. The corresponding falsification is equally sharp, a classic firewall test. If we can ever conclusively detect and isolate pure energy as an independent substance, a thing that exists separately from measurable phase dynamics and their associated knots, particles, fields, then this view is false. More practically, if we ever find a verified, unreconcilable violation of energy conservation, where the books truly do not balance, even under the most expansive licensed window accounting, the tally theory fails. To date, every apparent violation of energy conservation, from quantum fluctuations to cosmic expansion, has been resolved by expanding our window, discovering new forms of tally, new terms in the ledger, or recognizing a transfer to, from, a previously unaccounted system, like the gravitational field or the vacuum. The universe's books have always balanced. The firewall insists, if they ever don't, the fundamental framework is broken. From bookkeeping to force, the ledger enforces its rules. Now, a beautiful synthesis with part 8. If objects are knots, and energy is a tally of the activity of the field in which those knots exist, How do we get force? How does the ledger create the push and pull? Recall, knots distort the field around them. They create specific patterns in kappa, spatial gradients, and omega, temporal rhythms. When two knots approach, their distorted fields overlap. The total tally, the energy, of the combined system depends on their separation. The universe, through the principle of least action, which itself is a ledger balancing principle for phase, prefers configurations that minimize this total tally. Therefore, the knots will move in such a way as to minimize the total tally. If moving closer reduces the tally, they attract. If moving apart reduces the tally, they repel. Force is the gradient of the tally. It is the ledger's way of saying, if you move here, the books will balance more efficiently. The force you feel is not a primary entity. It is the kinematic experience of knots adjusting their positions to minimize the cosmic tally calculated from the omega and kappa patterns they collectively create. Newton's F equals ma, it's the ledger's enforcement mechanism. Lagrange's equations, they are the mathematical expression of tally minimization. All of dynamics is applied accounting. The shock and the wobbling, your trust in reality. Now feel the wobble, the ground shifting beneath you. You have been taught, directly or indirectly, that energy is the stuff that makes things happen, the ultimate currency, the conserved quantity that is neither created nor destroyed. It feels tangible. We harness it, we fear its release, we speak of it as a resource. To be told, after this long journey, that it is a bookkeeping entry, a number we calculate, not a thing that flows, is to have a foundational pillar of your reality turn to smoke. This is the greatest shock of Holophase so far. We have demoted the king of physics. Energy is not the sovereign, it is the scribe. It is not the cause, it is the record. It does not make things happen. It is the number that stays the same while things happen, according to the deeper grammar of phase change and topological protection. Your trust in energy as a thing in itself must wobble and reconfigure. You must learn to see the world not as a flow of energetic substance, but as a dynamic tapestry of phase patterns, where certain sums remain constant. And that constancy is what we have named and idolized. If you need one sentence that captures why Part 9 is the greatest shock, here it is. We thought energy was the substance behind reality. Holophase reveals energy is the audit trail of reality. An audit trail can be more dependable than any imagined substance because it is defined by what can be checked. How to measure a ledger, the operational discipline. Let's become concrete. When you measure energy, what do you actually do? You do not scoop energy into a cup. You do not weigh it directly like flour. You measure other things and compute. You measure frequency, wavelength, speed, height, force, displacement, voltage, current, temperature, pressure, or photon counts. Then you convert those readings into a number called energy. That is ledger behavior. It is the same as money. You do not measure money substance in a bank vault by tasting it. You measure transactions, deposits, withdrawals, and you compute a balance. Holophase insists that the deepest physical standards are phase and frequency standards. Clocks, oscillators, interference, lock-in comparisons. A civilization's strongest measurement backbone is not a warehouse of energy substance. It is a discipline of counting cycles, comparing phases, and tracing calibrations. Thus, we get a simple operational ledger protocol. 1. Define your window. Specify the space-time region and coherence threshold. 2. Measure phase activity. Reconstruct omega, temporal cadence, and kappa, spatial gradient, within the window, with uncertainties. 3. Compute the tally. Calculate the weighted integral. E equals alpha omega square plus beta plus kappa square dV, where alpha and beta are empirical coefficients, weighted by coherence. 4. Audit conservation. Track this tally across time. If it changes, compute the flux across the window's boundary, the energy flow in ledger terms. The books must balance. Change in tally equals flux in, flux out. 5. Parity check. Reconstruct using an independent method. If tallies disagree, your ledger is broken. Return to measurement. This is how we turn metaphysics into metrology. The ethical edge. Why ledgers create responsibility. Now listen, this is where part 9 becomes moral. If energy were substance, you could talk about it casually. It flows, it's stored, it's created, without caring how your accounting works. But if energy is a ledger, then every claim about energy is a claim about how you compute it, what you included, what you excluded, and what your uncertainty is. Ledger thinking forces honesty. It forces you to say, what is the window? What is the coherence weight? What are the measurable inputs? What is the calibration chain? What are the failure modes? This is why Holophase says, energy as tally is not reduction, it is discipline. A perpetual motion machine is not a physical impossibility, it is an accounting fraud. It hides an input, ignores a loss, or mismeasures a channel. As measurement becomes more coherent and audits become more rigorous, such fraud becomes impossible to sustain. Implications. From thermodynamics to consciousness. This reframing radiates out to touch everything. Thermodynamics, the famous laws. The first law, energy conservation, is the statement that the cosmic ledger is flawless. The second law, entropy increase, is the statement that the ledger entries tend to get distributed into more and more indistinguishable columns. The phase activity becomes more uniformly mixed and less locally organized. Entropy is the measure of the uniformity of the tally's distribution. It is not about disorder, but about the loss of distinguishable, coherent phase gradients. The arrow of time. Why does time have a direction? Because the ledger-keeping process is asymmetric. The tally tends toward uniform distribution. You can scramble an egg, but not unscramble it, because unscrambling would require recreating specific, coherent phase gradients from a uniform mix, a statistically forbidden ledger entry. Life and consciousness. A living organism is a knot that actively maintains and even increases local phase gradients, local tallies of high, coherent activity, against the universal trend toward uniformity. It imports low uniformity tallies, food, sunlight, and exports high uniformity tallies, waste heat. Consciousness may be the interior experience of this sustained, complex tally management, a self-referential ledger keeping track of its own ledger keeping. You are not an energy consumer. You are a localized pattern that temporarily maintains a non-uniform distribution of the cosmic phase activity tally. The ledger of meaning. This leads us to a breathtaking, perhaps controversial frontier. If energy is the physical ledger, could there be a correlate for meaning, for value? Just as the universe conserves a tally of phase activity, could conscious systems generate and conserve a tally of informational significance, a ledger of what matters? Love, trust, beauty, truth. These are not substances. They are relational tallies. They are numbers that balance within a relationship or a mind, derived from the complex phase alignments between conscious knots. They are conserved in their own domain. Broken trust subtracts from the tally. A kept promise adds to it. The universe's physical ledger is based on phi. Our human ledger of meaning may be based on a higher order, self-reflective layer of the same comparative grammar. We are not just tally keepers, we are tally makers. We invent new ledgers of value and then live by their conservation laws. How to live with the illusion, a pragmatic bridge. Now, a pragmatic word. Knowing energy is a tally does not mean you ignore the utility of the illusion. When you pay your electricity bill, you are paying for a service that rearranges phase patterns in wires to allow you to rearrange phase patterns in your home, to create light, heat, computation. The utility company measures the tally of omega Kla activity you used. The energy on the bill is the number. The service is the pattern rearrangement. You can still speak of saving energy. You are speaking of using pattern rearrangements that result in a lower tally number for the same outcome, a more efficient ledger entry. The illusion is pragmatically necessary. The truth is ontologically liberating. You are freed from the materialism of energy stuff. You can see the world as what it is, a dynamic, conserved play of pattern and comparison. The handoff to part 10, the source of the ledger. We have come to the edge. If energy is not a thing but a tally, and the tally is derived from omega and kappa, which are derivatives of phi, then what of phi itself? What is the source of this comparability? What writes the first entry in the ledger? If objects are knots and forces are tally gradients, what is the field in which these knots exist and this tally is kept? We have operated with phi as our primitive. We have measured its changes, derived its shadows, found its knots, and kept its tallies. But the final, ultimate question remains: what is the nature of the primitive? Is it a thing, a process, or something beyond that duality? Part 10 will be our final, most speculative, and most profound step. We will look at the source of the circle. We will ask, what is the nature of the potential for connection? We will explore the possibility that phi is not a thing at all, but the condition for thinghood, the aperture through which being appears, the comparator itself. We will approach the unspeakable, the source of the ledger. But for now, rest in the monumental shift of Part 9. What you carry from Part 9, the new mantra. Let the new mantra settle into you. Let it replace the old intuition. Energy is a report, not a thing. Energy is the conserved tally of phase activity. It is the number that balances in the universal ledger of omega and kappa. It is not a flowing substance, but a bookkeeping rule derived from the grammar of change. Conservation of energy is the statement that the books always balance. When you see a falling ball, see not a transfer of energetic fluid, but a transformation of spatial gradient, kappa, into temporal rhythm, omega, with a number that stays constant. When you feel the sun's warmth, feel not energy from the sun, but a reception of organized, high-frequency phase oscillations that increase the tally of activity in your skin, which your body then redistributes according to its own internal ledger. You are a knot that keeps books. The universe is the ledger. This is the great revelation, the demystification of the cosmos's most cherished concept. Walk in peace, and see the world not as a flow of power, but as a balance of accounts. Energy is a report. You are reading it.